There's still a lot of uncertainty around the U.S. and Iran reaching an agreement to end the conflict in the Middle East. The deadline of the ceasefire and the timing of future negotiations has been a moving target in recent days. In the meantime, the conflict has drawn the attention and criticism of Pope Leo, who's the first U.S.-born head of the Catholic Church. President Trump responded by chiding the Pope, and after an exchange of messages, the president posted to social media a now deleted AI image of himself as Jesus, prompting swift backlash from members of the faith community. I'm joined now by Bishop David O'Connell, who leads the Catholic Diocese of Trenton. Bishop, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
The Pope has said that the world is being ravaged by tyrants and that the Catholic Church takes the side of the humans involved. I'm going to ask you a philosophical question. How does the Church define whether a war is a, quote, just war?
Well, over the centuries, the Church has developed a tradition, a theory, a teaching, which is referred to in moral theology as the just war theory. And it's a series of principles that the Church puts forth that should be met before a war is considered to be just.
Can you give me a few of those? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can give you a couple of those. War is considered to be a serious evil, never a good. And the starting point for any consideration or discussion has got to be a presumption against war. There's got to be a just cause. In other words, it's got to be effectively restricted to defense. And there should be some proportionality. The harm that is caused by war must be weighed against other harms that might be present. There's got to be a legitimate defense that's ordered toward peace. There's got to be some expression of charity and concern for the enemy. And there are some limits on preventative war and a role for international authority. There's no such thing in the Church's teaching as a punitive war in the way that some older theories say.
Okay. With all of that and some of the things that the Pope has come out and said in some of his messages, the president has responded by calling the Pope weak on crime. Does the Church have a moral obligation to be tough on crime or to support that position in light of everything you just laid out?
Well, to be honest with you, when the president made that comment, I was baffled by it. I don't know how he would know that. The Pope has never been in a position, either as Pope or as Cardinal or as Bishop, where he had any responsibility for dealing with crime per se. And so that really, I thought, was a claim that didn't have much foundation.
I think that the president expounded on that by saying that, no one should want a world in which Iran has access to nuclear weapons, justifying the U.S. action there. But I just want to ask how you would characterize the Pope's response to the messaging that the president put out about him.
Well, I would like to say this first. The president has claimed that Pope Leo has spoken out in favor of Iran having nuclear weapons. And that is not true. That's not found anywhere in any of the talks or messages that Pope Leo is given. And so that, to me, is kind of a very difficult thing to accept.
But given to the question of how the Pope has responded, how would you characterize it?
I think his response has been very direct, very clear, very respectful. I don't think he has any desire, and he said this, to get into a debate or a war of words, so to speak, with the President of the United States.
The Church, the Catholic Church in particular, has recently seen an uptick in its parishioners coming in, new converts into the Church. And I'm not asking you to speak for any church beyond the Catholic Church, but it certainly wasn't just Catholics who reacted when they saw the president post this image. He says that he thought it was him as a doctor because he says he heals people and he helps people get better. What is your response and the response of your diocese to seeing that image?
Well, I don't know what the response of the whole diocese is, but my response was, that's a ridiculous thing to say. He obviously, or whoever generated that, obviously was trying to portray the president in a Jesus role. And that's what that picture represents. To me, I just think it's ludicrous.
I have to ask you, again, kind of a more philosophical question as we see the church weigh in on conflicts between the U.S. and other countries, and this isn't the only time the church has weighed in. Here in the U.S., does the separation of church and state still exist as the Founding Fathers first envisioned it, Thomas Jefferson first kind of outlined it?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think we make an effort to be very respectful of the state and its positions. But there is a clear separation between the two outlined in our foundational documents in the U.S., and I think we try to be respectful of that.
I know the church has said that it doesn't take a partisan position. The Pope has said that as well. But it has, the president has accused the church of becoming too liberal. Is there any partisan position here as you see it, or any type of language from anyone within the Catholic Church that has been partisan?
You know, I'm not exactly sure what that means, that the Pope or the Church have become much more liberal. But I will say we make a concerted effort, I know that I do, to avoid any kind of political entanglements. And the Pope has said that himself. He doesn't want to get involved in any politics. He preaches the gospel, and he's going to continue to preach that gospel, no matter how it's interpreted by political figures or political people.
I want to quote him a bit. The Pope said that he has no fear with neither the Trump administration nor speaking out loudly about the message of the gospel, and that the dignity of every human, the loss of life, suffering of the innocent, are tragedies. Where do you believe, does the Church believe, this conflict should go from here?
Well, the Pope is speaking as the universal shepherd, the universal leader of the Church, and he's speaking with a moral clarity. And I think he is making every effort that he can to focus attention away from war, away from violence, away from some of these things that he's accused of having said, to try to get people to be much more involved and interested in what the Church preaches. And what the Church preaches and what the Pope preaches is the gospel. And the gospel is the word and the thought of Jesus Christ. And the Pope is the vicar of Christ.
You know, I just have to ask you, as people hear the Church speaking out as this moral compass, this moral leader, there are critics who say, look, the Catholic Church has failed to be a moral leader over the years with the way that it's handled the sex scandals that have plagued the Church. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think there are, over the history of the Church, not just in recent years, but over the history of the Church, times when there have been moral failures. You're dealing with human beings, and I think that has to be kept in mind when you talk about things like the sex abuse crisis, terrible crisis, a terrible blight on the Church's experience, especially in more recent years. And so the Church is making every effort at this point to try to address that, try to be transparent, and try to correct that.
All right, we have to leave it there. But Bishop O'Connell, thank you so much for your time today. Bishop down there in Trenton, the Diocese in Trenton. We appreciate it.
You're most welcome.